My hands were clenched so tightly around the edge of the pew, I didn't realize they'd gone white. We were standing in the small church my father had gone to for 50 years, surrounded by people who thought they knew him. Friends, family, townfolk who'd watched us grow up. People who remembered him as the man who built their barns, fixed their cars, and never missed a Sunday. Then my brother Victor stepped up to the podium. He adjusted his black tie, smoothed back his perfect hair, and looked out at the crowd with that confident smile he's always had. You'd think he'd rehearsed for days the way he carried himself, like this was his moment, not Dad's. "I just want to say," Victor began, his voice steady, "Dad loved all of us. Of course he did, but he once told me he was proud of me most." There was a beat, just long enough for the words to settle. He smiled again, nodded toward the casket. "He said it was because I stayed strong, that I built something, that I never gave up." The room filled with soft murmurs, a few claps. My uncle even reached up to wipe a tear from his eye. But my stomach twisted. He was lying. Or maybe not lying exactly. Maybe Dad had said that to him once. Dad always favored Victor, always made it clear who the winner was between us. But in that moment, I felt something inside me break again, in a way I thought I had already healed from. I didn't plan on saying anything today. I wasn't going to fight for attention. I'd spent most of my life shrinking to make room for Victor's spotlight, so I stayed quiet until Eli, my 11-year-old son, stood up beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just quietly walked forward toward the casket, holding something in his small hands. My heart stopped when I realized what it was. An old black camcorder, the one we found last week in Dad's study, the one I hadn't told anyone about. Eli turned around slowly to face the crowd, his little frame silhouetted against the afternoon light pouring through the stained glass windows. He lifted the camera in the air and said, "Should I play what Grandpa said the night before he died?" The room froze. Victor looked confused. A woman in the back gasped, and everyone, every single person, turned to look at me. It was like someone knocked the wind out of my chest. The silence was deafening. I wanted to tell Eli to stop. I wanted to protect him. From what? From the truth? From my brother's fury? From the possibility that no one would believe it? I met my son's eyes, and in them I saw none of the fear I was feeling. It's calm determination. He wasn't doing this to cause drama. He was doing it because he knew what was on that tape mattered. And in that second, something shifted. This wasn't about me being right. This was about someone, anyone finally telling the truth. Because sometimes it takes a child to say the thing adults are too scared to, especially when that child has nothing to prove and only love to give. So I nodded, just once, and my son pressed play. I hadn't been back to Linden Falls in over 6 years. Driving down those winding Vermont roads, I almost forgot how the maples would stretch over you like old friends. The air smelled like cold soil and wet pine, but nothing about it felt warm anymore. This place stopped being home the day my mother died. I came back because my father was gone now too, Arthur Hollis, a man of few words and even fewer apologies. The church was only 2 miles from the farmhouse I grew up in. That house still creaks the same way at night, like it's whispering secrets through the walls. It's where I raised Eli these past few months after Dad got sick, while the world outside just kept moving. When Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Victor didn't even come home. He sent flowers, a card, and then silence. I was the one who moved in, took a leave from work, cooked for him, bathed him, cleaned up after the nightmares. He barely spoke at first, just stared at the ceiling or out the window like he was waiting to disappear. Victor always had a reason not to be there. Conference in Chicago, investment deal in Tokyo, charity gala in D.C. He'd built a perfect life on paper, beautiful wife, 3 daughters, magazine-featured home, and in Dad's eyes, that was the proof of success. But it was me who sat beside him in the dead of night when the morphine wasn't enough. It was me who held his hand when he couldn't breathe. It was me who asked him, "Do you want to say anything to anyone before you go?" He nodded, and that's when he asked for the camcorder. The same one he used to record our Christmas mornings and school plays, back when he still cared enough to show up. I found it tucked behind some old tax files. He held it like it was sacred, Like if he spoke into that lens, it could outlast his mistakes. He recorded the message in one take. When he was done, he closed his eyes. He never opened them again. I didn't know what to do with the video at first. I didn't even watch it right away. I couldn't. I was angry, grieving, confused. Part of me thought maybe he'd left Victor a message about business or left Eli some kind of life advice. I wasn't expecting what he said, but I'll get to that. Let me tell you a little more about who we were before that day in the church. I'm Grace Hollis. I'm 42. A single mom, divorced 2 years ago after 13 years of marriage that felt like trying to hold water in my hands. I work remotely as a copy editor, which pays the bills, barely, and lets me be home for Eli when school ends. Eli's everything to me. 11 years old, going on 40. Sensitive, smart, observant in that way kids are when they've had to grow up fast. He notices silence more than words. He asks questions like, why do people pretend when they're sad? And do adults lie on purpose or do they forget the truth? The only person I ever saw him truly open up to was my mother, Diana. She was the warmth in our cold family. When she passed, it felt like someone turned out the lights in our house and never turned them back on. Dad changed after that. He got quieter, meaner sometimes. He didn't know how to grieve, and in a house where emotions were weakness, I became the odd one out. Victor climbed the ladder. I became the caretaker, the quiet daughter, the one who settled. Victor was the chosen one. He always had the answer in class, the winning shot at the game, the golden college acceptance letter. I was the one who forgot her lines in the school play and got a B- in algebra. Dad's voice, when he bothered to use it, was sharp. Your brother doesn't give up. He fights. You cry too much. That was the rhythm of our lives. But during those last weeks, when it was just me and the man who never looked me in the eye, I started to wonder if he finally saw me. He couldn't say much, but sometimes he'd grab my wrist and hold it. Just hold it. His eyes would soften. His breathing would slow. One night, he whispered, "You stayed." That's all he said. And I think part of him knew that maybe, just maybe, it mattered more than he'd ever let on. The church filled up quicker than I expected. I sat near the front with Eli, holding his small hand in mine, while the murmurs of old neighbors, distant cousins, and former coworkers echoed softly behind us. The kind of small-town buzz that says everything except what people really think. The wooden pews creaked as they settled into place, and I could feel eyes on me. Some of it was pity, some of it was curiosity. I was the daughter who disappeared, the one who never left town but somehow stayed invisible. Victor walked in 20 minutes late, wearing a $2,000 suit and a rehearsed expression of grief. His wife, Mara, followed 2 steps behind, like always. Their 3 daughters looked uncomfortable, overdressed for a funeral none of them really wanted to attend. Victor didn't make eye contact as he passed me, just a slight nod. Maybe that was his version of hello. I looked at Eli. He gave me a tiny smile like he knew I needed it. Dad's coffin stood at the front of the room, oak, polished, military flag folded on top, dignified, like he always tried to be. But all I could think about was the way he whispered my name the last night he was alive. I still hadn't told anyone what was on the tape. I kept the camcorder in my purse. It felt like a secret too big to carry and too dangerous to share. The service moved in slow motion. Hymns, readings, scripture. People saying things like, "He was a good man and he'll be missed." I stayed quiet. The words didn't sit right with me. They felt like half-truths dipped in sugar. Then the pastor invited anyone who wanted to speak to come forward. Victor stood before I could move. He walked to the podium like he owned it, one hand on the wood, the other casually in his pocket. He looked around, letting the silence settle over the crowd. He started slow. A few childhood memories. One about Dad teaching him how to shoot a basketball. Another about fixing their old Dodge Ram in the garage. Then came the line that made my stomach twist. Dad loved all of us, but he once told me he was proud of me most. He said it so smoothly, like he was quoting scripture. His voice didn't waver. He said I made something of myself, that I stayed strong when things got hard, that I never folded. Polite chuckles, a few nods. Someone actually clapped. I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just misremembering. He was rewriting history right there in front of everyone. And no one, not the pastor, not the guests, not even my aunt, questioned it. I felt like I was sinking into the floor. Did no one remember who actually sat beside Dad during chemo? Who cleaned out his bedpans? Who made the doctor appointments and chased down the hospice nurse on Christmas Eve? Victor didn't even call on Dad's birthday. I wanted to scream, to stand up and say, "Are you kidding me?" He wasn't even here. But I didn't. I've spent a lifetime shrinking in rooms Victor fills effortlessly. I squeezed Eli's hand. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said softly, "Mom, you should tell them." I shook my head. He leaned in closer and whispered, "They don't know what he said, but we do." The camcorder was still in my purse. I could feel its weight against my leg. I knew what was on that tape. I'd watched it alone the night before, in Dad's recliner, wrapped in his old flannel blanket. I watched it twice, once with anger, once with tears. Dad had looked straight into the camera and said things I'd waited my whole life to hear. Things that could burn a hole through every lie Victor just told. But to play that tape, to challenge Victor in front of everyone, meant choosing war over peace. Again. And I was so tired of fighting for my place in a family that kept pretending I didn't belong. Eli tugged my arm. "It's not about making them look bad. It's about making you seen." He was right. That's what scared me most. Because what if I stood up and no one cared? What if the truth didn't matter? I closed my eyes. My heart pounded in my throat. I didn't know what to do, but Eli did. The last hymn faded into silence, and the room was still. Victor stepped down from the podium to a warm pat on the back from one of Dad's old co-workers. His speech had landed the way it was meant to, composed, polished, clean. It left no room for challenge, no cracks for truth to leak through. I stayed seated, rigid, as people rose and began forming a slow line to the casket. Some bowed their heads, some whispered goodbyes. Mare, Victor's wife, dabbed her eyes with a tissue and guided their daughters up one by one, like a pageant rehearsal. Eli sat perfectly still beside me. I thought he might have let it go. Maybe he sensed my hesitation. Maybe he understood that I didn't want to cause a scene. But then he stood up. I reached for his sleeve instinctively. "Eli, wait." He looked at me, calm as ever. "It's time, Mom." In his hands, he held the camcorder. My chest tightened. "We talked about this. Not here." "You said the truth matters," he said. "You said it should be heard." I looked around. No one was paying attention to us yet. They were still focused on the casket, on the flowers, on their private memories of the man they thought they knew. Eli took a step forward. I could feel the shift like a drop in air pressure before a storm. Something was about to change. He walked up to the front, slowly, deliberately, and stood next to the casket. He wasn't tall enough to be seen by everyone, so he turned and stood on the small step beside the altar. Then, clearly and confidently, he held up the camcorder and said, "Should I play what Grandpa said the night before he died?" The room froze. You could feel it happen, like someone pressed pause on the entire day. Victor turned. Confusion flickered across his face, followed by a flash of annoyance. Mara's jaw tightened. Even the pastor looked unsure of what to do. I felt every pair of eyes shift toward me. Some confused, some expectant, some, if I'm honest, already judgmental. And I knew in that moment I had a choice. I could stand up, walk to my son, and quietly take the camcorder out of his hands, smile, apologize, make some excuse about emotions getting the better of us. Let the lie live a little longer, bury it with the man who built it. Or I could let the truth stand, even if it stood alone. I rose slowly. My knees shook under me, but I walked to Eli's side. I stood next to my father's casket next to my son and faced the room that had decided a long time ago who I was allowed to be. Victor stepped forward, raising his hand slightly like he was trying to calm a crowd. "Grace, what is this? Can we not do this right now? This isn't the time." I met his eyes for the first time that day. "No, Victor, it's exactly the time. You had your say. Now it's Dad's turn." There was a long, thick pause, the kind that makes your throat go dry. I turned to Eli. "Go ahead." He pressed play. The camcorder's small speaker came to life with a quiet whir, followed by a raspy voice I hadn't heard in days but would never forget. Grace, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and I need to say some things I should have said a long time ago. Gasps. Movement. Someone whispered, "What is this?" Victor took a step forward, but Mara caught his wrist, stopping him. I spent too many years thinking strength meant being hard, that love was something you earned by being impressive. But I was wrong. Grace, I was hardest on you, and you were the one who stayed, the one who forgave me. You were the one I should have told. I was proud of you, most of all. That was the moment. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was stunned. Breathing changed. A few people were crying. I saw my aunt press a trembling hand to her chest. The pastor lowered his head. I felt my own tears slide down my cheeks, not from grief, but from relief. For once in my life, I wasn't invisible. Not because I fought for attention, because the truth finally spoke for me. And this time, everyone was listening. The video played for less than 3 minutes, but it felt like time slowed down around us. There was no music, no flashy production, just my father's face. Frail, unshaven, eyes glassy, voice cracked but deliberate, filling the tiny camcorder screen as it sat, balanced on the pulpit beside Eli's small hand. Victor, if you see this, I hope you know I'm proud of your accomplishments, but I made a mistake with your sister. I made her feel small to make you feel big. I thought that was balance. It wasn't. It was cowardice. You could hear the silence get heavier. Some people turned their heads toward Victor, others toward me. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. My entire body had gone still, except for the tears rolling down my face and my hand holding Eli's. Grace, I didn't understand you. You were emotional, and I saw that as weakness. But it was strength. Real strength. You loved me even when I didn't deserve it. You stayed when others didn't. And in the end, I wasn't proud of you because of what you did. I was proud of you because of who you are. That was the moment I couldn't hold it in anymore. My chest broke open. I had waited my entire life to hear words like that, and somehow they came when it was too late to respond, too late to ask why, too late to hug him and say, "Thank you for finally seeing me." But still, it was enough. It was finally enough. The video ended in static. Eli pressed the stop button. The sound disappeared, and for a long, breathless stretch, no one spoke. Then slowly, the pastor stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on the camcorder. Sometimes, the departed leave behind more than memories. Sometimes, they leave truth. We all heard it. He looked over at me, not just as a minister, but as a man who'd watched me grow up in the shadow of my brother. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Victor shifted in his seat. His face was pale, eyes wide, mouth tight like he wanted to say something, but didn't have the words. He stood, finally, and for a moment I braced for conflict, but instead he just walked over, slowly, hands in his pockets, and looked down at the casket, not at me. He placed his hand on the wood and whispered, "I didn't know." I stared at him. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe this moment could open something in him, too. Maybe it would. Maybe it wouldn't. He turned to me briefly, eyes glistening, and said, "I thought you just wanted attention." I almost laughed. I shook my head. "No, Victor. I just wanted the truth." He didn't argue. He just gave the faintest nod and stepped away. I think that was the first honest exchange we'd had in 20 years. The service continued, but it felt different now, like a curtain had been pulled back and light was pouring into a room that had always stayed dark. People came up to me after. Some were crying, some apologized. Some didn't say anything at all, just hugged me like they were finally allowed to. One older woman I barely remembered from childhood leaned in and said, "He never talked about his feelings, but you broke through that wall. Don't let anyone take that away from you." I smiled for the first time that day and whispered, "Thank you." Eli walked with me to the car, his hand swinging in mine. He looked up at me as we buckled in. "You okay, Mom?" I looked at him, my son, my strength, my anchor, and nodded. "Yeah, I really am." He smiled. He meant it, what he said. I could tell. I kissed the top of his head. I know, and you made sure they heard it. As we pulled away from the church, I glanced back at the steeple in the rearview mirror. It stood tall, unmoved, unshaken, but something inside me had shifted. Not because my father changed, not because Victor admitted anything, but because I finally stopped waiting for someone else to validate my worth. My father saw me at the end, and the world heard it. That was enough. And somehow, in the quiet strength of a child's voice and a final message from a dying man, everything changed. It's been 3 months since the funeral. The leaves have turned and fallen now, blanketing the yard behind my father's house in quiet gold. Eli likes to rake them into piles just so he can run through them again. Sometimes I sit on the porch and watch him, coffee in hand, thinking about how much changed in that one afternoon, how much was finally said. After the service, people were different with me. Not all at once, not in big dramatic gestures, but in small, deliberate ways that felt honest. Some sent handwritten notes. A few old family friends brought casseroles or offered to help around the house. Even Aunt Lorna, who once told me I was too sensitive for this family, called just to talk. It wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about being seen. My entire life, I fought the feeling that I didn't belong in my own family, that being quiet or emotional or not as put together made me less valuable. But the truth is, I wasn't weak. I was carrying things no one else saw, and it took a camcorder, a dying man's confession, and a brave little boy with a big heart to remind everyone, including me, that being strong doesn't always mean being loud. Sometimes it means standing still while the world spins and holding on to what's true. Victor hasn't called since that day, but I'm not angry. Not anymore. I don't need him to apologize. I don't need him to validate what Dad said. That moment wasn't for him. It was for me, and I claimed it. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would say if he could see the ripple effect that video caused. Maybe he wouldn't believe how much weight his words carried. Or maybe he would. Maybe deep down, he always knew I needed to hear them, even if he couldn't bring himself to say them until the very end. The camcorder sits in my closet now, zipped into a case I labeled in Sharpie. For Eli, one day. Because one day, he'll need to hear something from me too. One day he'll feel small or unsure or left out, and I want him to know that his voice mattered, that his heart, his instinct for truth and fairness changed something real. I asked him once, a few nights after the funeral, why he did it, why he took the camcorder up there without asking first. He looked at me, shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and said, "Because you deserved for people to know. Grandpa knew it too. He just needed help saying it." I cried in the hallway that night, quietly so I wouldn't wake him. Because he was right. We all need help saying the things that matter. We wait too long. We bury the words. We protect the illusion of peace instead of speaking truth with love. But truth can be the most healing thing we offer each other. And when we share it, no matter how late, it matters. Before I left town, I uploaded the video. I debated it for days. I wasn't sure how it would be received. I didn't want to be seen as attention-seeking or airing private family matters, but eventually I realized it wasn't about any of that. It was about preserving my father's final moment of honesty, about honoring what he finally gave. So I titled the video, "What My Father Finally Said." I didn't promote it. I didn't tag anyone. But somehow, it made its way around. Strangers left comments saying it helped them find the courage to speak up, that it reminded them to reach out to their daughters, their sisters, their moms. And maybe that's the biggest gift. My story, our story, isn't just about what one man failed to say for decades. It's about how, even in his last breath, he gave us a chance to rewrite the ending. So many of us walk around with silent wounds, aching to be seen. Sometimes we're waiting for someone else to notice. Other times, we're the ones who need to speak up, for ourselves or for someone we love. That day in the church, I didn't stand up alone. My son stood with me, and in doing that, he gave me something I'd waited my whole life to receive. Not just a father's pride, but my own voice. And this time, I didn't let it go unheard. So if this story moved you, even just a little, do something with it. Tell someone the truth you've been holding on to. Say the words you think it's too late to say, because it's not. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's been unseen, unheard, or quietly carrying more than anyone knows, share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. If you felt something, if you connected with this story, give it a like. It helps more than you know. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part resonated with you most. I read everyone, and your stories matter too. If you want more real stories like this, stories that peel back the layers and go deeper, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Thanks for spending time here with me. I see you, and I'm glad you're here. Until next time, take care of your heart and each other.